Okay, people, how you doing? It's Thursday, March 19. We are all having to take care of loved ones and keep lookout for them. And this boy right here is no different. This is Django. He is one of our oldest cats, and he is a very sweet boy. But sometimes he will not let me work because he needs to be picked up. So I'll tell you what I'll tell you today, while also giving him some comfort and a warm place to sit. Couple things. First of all, since the video from Tuesday, I couldn't get the whole thing on YouTube. I sent you a brief thing about Rescued by Rover. I just want to reiterate, Rescued by Rover is an interesting milestone on the way to continuity editing, in the sense that it repeats the pattern of space in that film in the space of about 5 minutes. Repeats the pattern 3 times to a point where you know very well where Rover is going, and where he's coming back from, as he seeks to reunite the family with the baby that was stolen. So anyway, yeah, that film's kind of self-explanatory. It's a beautiful illustration of creative geography, in the sense that it creates understandable screen space, but there's no master shot, so you never see the whole city at once. You kind of have to put it together from the way he's pulling me farther and farther, the way that he follows space and the way he inhabits space. So anyway, the other things I wanted to mention, three more things: Birth of a Nation, His Girl Friday, and what we're going to talk about next week. I've asked you to watch Birth of a Nation. I'm going to send you some notes that I would typically use when we talked about this stuff in class. You're not really, I can't say you're going to be tested on everything in the notes. We'll have an exam review. Obviously, we'll have to do some kind of test at the end of all this foolishness. But Birth of a Nation is a film that you watched, and it's extraordinary in many ways, and we need to sort of put that in context. The first thing you probably noticed is that it is racist. It is a racist film, deeply racist. It shows a deep misconception of history and how the Civil War and the aftermath of the Civil War played out. Valorizes the Ku Klux Klan, who are a patently hate organization, hate mongers of the highest order, and so for those reasons, it's somewhat troubling. Unfortunately, aesthetically, it is a document of immense value to us. So it's a little bit like if the Rosetta Stone contained a racist joke, is probably a decent analogy for how important it is aesthetically to the development of the medium, the storytelling capacity of the medium, and at the same time, how repugnant it is in cultural terms. And it was repugnant in cultural terms at the time, too. So it's not something that everybody accepted in 1915 and said, oh, yeah, sure, that's what happened. Not at all. Although, as your book mentions, many people were merely 50 years removed from the end of the Civil War. So it was a living memory for a lot of people. But we simply have to deal with it in terms that we can try to make use of what's valuable about it, and at the same time condemn that which is offensive to us. Not just offensive, but quite frankly inaccurate, historically inaccurate and irresponsible. So there's that. But per the notes I'm giving you on it, there's a couple things I wanted to mention about it, because the book does a good job of discussing its aesthetic innovations. That is to say, what it shows you within the frame, the use of Griffith's techniques within the frame, and also the techniques that he uses in terms of joining different scenes. Okay, he's had enough. Good. Off you go. How he puts different scenes together. And one thing I want to mention, not one thing I want to mention, several things I want to mention. Aesthetically, and this is per the notes that I'll send you, It is a distillation of every kind of film technique that's been practiced up until the point of its release. And remember, when Birth of a Nation comes out, we're only 20 years from the first paid exhibition of celluloid for an audience. So it's a very, very quick development. To put that in perspective, it has been more than 20 years since Armageddon came out. It's been more than 20 years since The Matrix came out. So time flies in a lot of ways. And we haven't seen those kind of aesthetic developments in such a rapid development of aesthetic techniques in some time. Um, Economically, obviously, it pushes motion pictures to a different kind of status. They're treated as events. They are road shown. That is when a major motion picture is advertised heavily, and the amount of time it spends in a particular locale is limited to basically create demand for tickets, and it's treated more like an event than a just another film being released. Um, Culturally, obviously, it demonstrates that movies are an extraordinarily powerful film for depicting, misinterpreting, misrepresenting, etc. history, but also for teaching history for good or ill, and in this case, ill because the history is corrupt. But it shows them to be a very, very powerful medium, and also the power of historical film and how that resonates with people. And we're still dealing with this today. Um, Thematically, and this is an important thing, it codifies some things that we still have deeply, deeply baked into a lot of contemporary releases, and that is sentimental realism, first of all. That is to say, recognizable realism, but in a sort of a sentimental and narratively satisfying way for audiences. Essentially, it panders to audiences to make them feel good in certain ways. And it has a happy ending, such as it is. It thinks it has a happy ending. Personalization of history in terms of taking a big event, in this case the Civil War, and putting it in terms of probably a half a dozen characters that we care about and whose arcs we are able to identify and stay with. And righteous violence, the idea that violence is really okay if it's carried out for the right reasons, okay? And that is something that, again, is deeply baked into American culture, and you see it all the time in, first of all, war metaphors, especially the ones that are flying around now about how we're at war with a virus, and how, in war, basically anything is justified, and especially certain kinds of killing and righteous violence in order to win that war, whether it's a war on terror or war on terrorism or war on bacteria. Okay, so anyway, although there's a virus, not a bacteria. Anyway, okay, and I got to tell a little story about the personalization of history thing, and that is to show you how this endures. I guess early 2000s when Michael Bay did his film Pearl Harbor. Um, one of my sisters knew that I was a Michael Bay fan, and she saw the film before I did. She asked me what I thought of it. I said I didn't know, I hadn't seen it. She said, "Well, I think you'll like it." And I said, "Oh, well, what did you think was so good about it?" And she said, "Well, I think the thing that really, really touched me most was it's just such a love story." Yeah. So, the invasion of Pearl Harbor, which killed thousands of people and is one of the most traumatic events in our nation's history. And it was just a love story because, they took three very good looking young people and put them as the focus of the story and made it about their love triangle as much as about the attack on Pearl Harbor. So that is kind of a tried and true method for dealing with historical subjects in mainstream film. So by all means, approach them with suspicion. Um, yeah, and it's also, I think, this is sort of unfortunate to say, but it must be said, it is kind of an exciting film, and that's one of the reasons I asked you guys to watch the whole thing instead of just showing clips, is because it builds over its arc. It builds at a slower pace than we're used to, but it is kind of the first contemporary action film in the sense that it's all motion, it's all action, it builds to a big climax, and it is in its way engrossing, all the while representing attitudes that we, of course, find repulsive today. Okay, anyway, so that's a little bit about Birth of a Nation. Feel free to share your thoughts on that. One more thing I want to mention before we go away is we're kind of talking about a sense of point A to point B here, or milestones in getting from the origins of the medium to the kind of films we're used to seeing today. And to that end, I want to give you a screening to watch over the weekend that is another kind of milestone. It's not so much this film as this type of film, really, that is important. You saw some clips about the origins of the actual physical phenomena that allow motion pictures to happen. You saw Birth of a Nation, which is a sort of a 20-year reality check, real compendium of what is being done in storytelling techniques to that point. What I would like you to watch, and I'll put this in the notes that I'm sending you, is a film called His Girl Friday, 1940 film with Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell, and it's really funny. It's both really funny and really basic. It's really basic in the sense that it was shot on sound stages. There's really only 3 or 4 sets in the whole film. I should probably say half a dozen. But very, very limited. The stagecraft or the film craft is very, very simple, very straightforward. It's people standing around talking to each other. And what really makes it interesting, really the entire energy of the film is carried in the dialogue. And so this is a film that was the kind of film that after Hollywood had kind of codified its production techniques and found the kinds of narrative formulas that, oh, look who's back. The kinds of narrative formulas that were profitable and would keep people coming to the movies with only a little bit of variation. This is a film that is kind of a model for a lot of films that came after it, in the sense that all the mojo, all the energy, all the interest and the humor is carried through the dialogue, and that was a matter of sound film. And so that was it's a really good film as an example of what happens after the sound revolution, which you read about in Cook's text, and how when you have sound as one of the tools in your bag of tricks as a filmmaker, you can do an awful lot with it, and it saves you a lot of visual recording, image capture, and it can carry a story just fine. So it's also a very entertaining film, so I hope you like it. If you don't tell me, because people don't like that movie. What are you going to do? Anyway, so watch His Girl Friday. It's on Canopy, and I'll probably say a word or two about it next week. The other thing I want to mention is just to say, hold on a second, let me check my notes. Next week we will be talking about narrative, the kinds of stories, the shapes of stories that get told in the American film industry, the mainstream American film industry, and how they offer the same thing, only different. They offer a certain kind of formula, but they also provide a certain amount of innovation. So anyway, that's in the notes, and keep reading. Sound off. Let me hear from you. Let me know everything's okay, and any thoughts about the films or the assignments. Yes, the things I ask you to watch that you want to send in, I'm happy to compile and share. So anyway, be well, and have a good weekend, and we will go around again next week. Bye-bye.